Nobody on set was prepared for what happened between Yandy and Sierra this week. It began like any other filming. Day cameras were rolling, and the crew was attempting to catch the ideal balance of laughter and shade, but the air was different. There was a hushed anxiety, as if something unpleasant was about to emerge. Sierra decided to open her mouth. She did not just toss casual shade. She went for the jugular, whispering about Yandy's alleged prior relationships with a few familiar individuals. Yandy tried to remain calm at first, her eyes narrowing, lips squeezed tight, and palms folded as if she were praying for patience. However, the words kept flowing. Sierra's tone was sleek and confident, as if she knew she was going to shut the room down. And she did. Just not in the way she intended, because the moment she passed that invisible boundary, Yandy sprang up, closed the space between them, and smacked her in one rapid stroke. The sound sliced through the conversation, the background music, and everything else. People gasped, somebody yelled, and in that instant, the overall feeling turned from pleasant banter to complete anarchy. The sound of that slap lingered in the air for longer than it should have, reverberating off the walls, and bouncing between everyone's astonished expressions. It wasn't just the clarity of the moment, but how it sliced through the phony grins, background banter, and meticulously planned scene they'd been recording. Suddenly, the entire set froze. Nobody moved. Nobody exhaled too loudly, as if the tiniest sound could set off something far bigger. The cameras kept running, but the tone had evolved from reality TV banter to something more visceral and unpredictable. Sierra's fingertips slid gently to her cheek, her fingers brushing across the region where Yandy's palm had rested. Her eyes widened, not from shock, but from the awareness that this moment had been permanently etched into everyone's memory. Her lips opened as if she were ready to say something sharp, but nothing came out in that short second. That silence felt weighty, almost electric, with each second extending out farther than the last dot in the rear. One of the production helpers accidentally dropped a clipboard, causing half the room to cringe. Several folks exchanged looks. Some people were hiding their amazement. Others had already imagined the headlines and edits. This would become popular once it aired. Yandy stood there, shoulders squared, gaze fixed on Sierra with a look that was equal parts rage and restrained. It didn't look like someone had lost control, okay? However, earlier in the day, someone chose to quit biting her tongue. Nobody could have guessed it. It would come to this. The ambience in the green room prior to recording was casual makeup brushes gliding across faces, light talk about who was late, and humorous comments about outfit choices. But beyond the chuckles, there was simmering anger that had been building up for weeks. It began simply, with small digs here and there, but with time, the dynamic between Yandy and Sierra altered. People observed it, but nobody wanted to be the one to bring it up. Then, during a break in shooting, Sierra revealed something. She was laughing with a few of the others, recounting a story about how people can reinvent themselves whenever they choose. However, their history is continually catching up. Her tone was tinged with enough irony to indicate that she wasn't just speaking generally. The others noticed the undertone immediately and exchanged hushed glances. Later, when the cameras were rolling again, she made it clear. You know, some of us don't need to pretend like we never had certain TIs, Sierra continued, her eyes glancing toward Yandy, just long enough to make the message evident, especially when those connections include people we all know. There was a slight change in the room right then. There is a noticeable change in your chest. Some of the cast members halted in the middle of their laughter, unsure whether to continue or leave the words linger. Yandy's countenance remained unchanged at first, with a gradual blink. Her jaw tightened slightly, but it was obvious. In her gaze, she had heard every word, and she wasn't going to let it go. Sierra kept talking, and she started throwing indications that it felt too detailed to be accidental. Old names, half-told stories, and rumors that had circulated for years, but were never substantiated. She wove them into her comments, read like casual observations, but the effect was far from casual. Some crew members later described the experience as similar to seeing someone play chicken with a moving train. You knew the collision was coming. You couldn't look away. One source close to production told a friend that Yandy had previously advised Sierra quietly that there were some things she would not allow being dragged into the storyline. But Sierra was not the sort to back down when she believed she had the upper hand. She leaned into it, almost as if to see how far she could push before breaking. When it happened without a cry or a wild rush. Yandy stood from her seat smoothly, stepped closer, and touched Sierra's face with a measured, purposeful movement. The sound reverberated throughout the stage. The smack was not wild. It was measured almost surgically, but its impact went beyond the bodily. That was a statement. Male DCs who had been seated a few feet away straightened in his chair, his countenance a mix of surprise and that look you get when you know you'll have to step in at any moment. He said nothing, but his gaze bounced between the two women, as if he were trying to determine whether this was the conclusion or simply the beginning. Sierra broke the silence first. Her voice was low, but every syllable carried. "So that is what you do now. You can't handle the truth, so you put your hands on me." She angled her head slightly, still touching her cheek, her tone accusing. Yandy's reply was cool but sharp, the type of calm that goes deeper than shouting. "You have no idea what you're talking about, and you keep my." That's when the murmur began, not loud enough to disrupt the scene, but enough to indicate that everyone was discussing in their respective corners. "Don't say anything unless you can back it up with evidence." Some people looked stunned, while others appeared to have been waiting for this all season. One of the producers quickly motioned for the camera team to keep shooting. Moments like this were rare, but when they did occur, they were ratings gold. Sierra's posture changed, and she moved forward just enough to close the gap between them. Smirking, she returned as if she had suddenly realized the game wasn't finished. "Maybe I don't need to prove anything," she murmured slowly. "Maybe people should just start connecting the dots themselves." A few gasps rippled through the room. It wasn't just what she said, it was how she said it, as if she was holding something back on purpose. The insinuation alone was enough to set off a chain reaction in everyone there. Yandy's eyes narrowed for a minute. It seemed like she might react again. Instead, she took a short step back, her eyes unwavering. The atmosphere remained tense, as if everyone were holding their breath and wait for the next step. That's when one of the other cast members, attempting to defuse the situation but actually exacerbating it, said, "Come on now. We've all grown up here. If you have something to say, just say it." The words functioned as lighter fluid on an open flame. Sierra's the grin widened. "Oh, I'm just getting started." She shifted her weight, her voice loud enough to be heard, in the far corner of the room. "Because if we're going to be real, let's be completely real." The way she lingered on that statement hinted at something more serious than what she had just said. Even though no one knew where she was going with it, the temperature in the room dropped slightly as everyone braced themselves for what might happen next. Sierra's comments felt like a challenge, her voice full of confidence and provocation. She did not blink, nor did she back down. Allow the weight of that words to hang in the air long enough for everyone to feel it settle into their chests. You could see the ripples in the room. People shifted in their seats, some pushing forward as if they were in the front row of a boxing match, while others silently slid their phones out to record because they knew whatever occurred next would be discussed for weeks. Yandy stayed motionless, her face unreadable, but her eyes, Sierra's expression remained constant. It was the kind of glare that said, "You better think about your next move." But Sierra clearly had no plans to reconsider anything. She seems to feed off the stress. "Do you know what is funny?" Sierra began to change her tone to something lighter, almost playful. But everyone knew it was just the surface covering something cutting. People enjoy pretending to be all about honesty and loyalty until honesty becomes too personal. Her glance wandered around the scene, eventually returning to Yandy, and her smirk deepened. Yandy's single quotes caused our shoulders to rise and fall in a leisurely breath, but she did not speak. Her silence seemed to encourage Sierra. "Since we're talking about keeping it genuine, perhaps we should discuss how certain friendships evolved into other things. And perhaps how those other things did not end as expected. They were meant to." Several people in the room gasped. The kind of gasp you get when you realize someone has just passed a line they can't go back over. One of the camera operators altered his angle, zooming in on Yandy's face, because if there was any, the tiniest flicker of reaction yielded gold. Yandy finally responded, "What are you talking about?" Her voice was low but clear. She didn't raise it, but it sliced more sharply than shouting could. "You know exactly what I'm talking about," Sierra said without hesitation. "And so do some of the folks seated here. Ain't that right?" She turned her head slightly, locking eyes with another cast member who quickly looked aside. Their sudden concentration in the floor spoke volumes without saying anything. The murmuring in the room became louder, like a low hum of electricity coursing through the set. One of the producers went forward, hand half lifted, as if about to say something, but suddenly he stopped. Yandy took a single step forward, closing some of the space between them, clearly determining that it was best to let this play out. Sierra, if you have anything to say it. Stop hiding behind half-truths and suggestions. If you're trying to convey a tale, tell it completely, because all I hear right now is noise. Sierra's demeanor changed somewhat, her smirk becoming more serious. Fine, you want me to say it? I'll admit it. There were periods when some individuals believed they could have it all: family at home, business in the front, and fun on the side. I'm not talking about no strangers. I'm talking about people in this circle, people in this room. And the reaction was immediate. Some gasped, others mumbled under their breath, while a few simply looked, their eyes jumping between Sierra and Yandy like they were watching a ping-pong match with no idea where the ball would fall. Yandy shook her head slowly, a humorless smile tugging on the corner of "So that's the game you're playing? Telling lies in the hopes that one of them sticks?" Sierra retorted, "You know there's people out here who've seen things, heard things, and you think everyone forgot?" At this point, one of the other women in the cast, plainly uncomfortable but unable to stay Yandy, cut in sharply, her voice cutting through the noise. "This isn't the time or place. This is the perfect time and place, because I'm not going to let her sit here and paint whatever she wants while I'm standing right here." The space felt smaller and the air was heavier. Even the sound of someone shifting in their chair drew attention in this environment. Sierra, who remained cool on the surface, took a slight step closer, just enough to totally close the gap, and the crew tensed as if they were ready to leap in if things went aggressive. Again, Yandy, you can try to deny it all you want, but I've got receipts, and when the time comes, maybe I'll show them to everyone. That final line immediately shifted the tone. Receipts was the key word. Suddenly, the whispers in the room became sharper and faster, like the sound of matches. Yan tilted her head slightly, her gaze narrowing. Mendes finally spoke, his voice low but firm. "You both need to chill before this." His presence alone removed part of the heat from the air, but not enough to completely extinguish the fire. "Oh, don't worry," Sierra murmured, casting a quick glance at him. "I'm not afraid to correct things. I'm just not one of those folks who sweeps the truth under the rug." Yandy let out a short, and just like that, they were back at it, circling each other with words sharp enough to cut. The team was kept recording, their lenses catching every flash of expression, every sideways glance, every twitch of the jaw. Even folks who usually stayed silent were leaning forward, lured in like moths. Someone from the cosmetics team whispered to a nearby crew member. A tiny smirk tugged at the corner of her mouth. "You're really going to stand there holding that phone, trying to look like you have the keys to the kingdom?" she replied, her voice cool, almost amused. "But I've been in this game long enough to know people who have solid proof. There's no need to do all of this theater." Sierra's response was just as calculated, and that's where you got it wrong. Sometimes the theater is the fun part. Sometimes it's best to let folks wonder what you've got before you actually drop it. The inference in her tone caused a few people to shift uneasily. A tiny group in the back was muttering now, attempting to predict what may be on that phone. Photos, movies, messages, the possibilities were limitless. And in a setting like this, every conceivable situation looked worse than the previous. Mendes stepped forward slightly, his eyes narrowing. "Whatever you believe you've got, you better consider long and hard. You utilize it, because once it's out there, you can't get it back. And believe me, there's a lot more at stake than just some on-set drama." Sierra's gaze slipped to his, her face unreadable. "I understand what's at risk. Maybe that's the point." Yandy crossed her arms, her voice firm but warning. "You keep playing with fire, Sierra. You're going to be burned. I don't know what little fantasy you've conjured up in your head, but I'm not going to let you drag my name through it just because you think it would make a good television fantasy." Sierra's brow furrowed, and her voice became a little hotter for the first time. "That is exactly what you want people to think." Sierra shifted her phone to her other hand, glancing down at it as if she were deciding whether or not to open it. "You want them to believe this is all an exaggeration. But not everything is as clean as you like to pretend." There was a pause that felt like a free fall before impact. The entire set appeared to lean forward at once, and Yandy took a step forward, her gaze never leaving Sierra's. "You sure you want to go there?" "Maybe I already did," Sierra said, her words slow and thoughtful. A couple of the other cast members exchanged worrisome looks. One of them murmured under their breath, "This is going to blow up bigger than anyone is prepared for." That's when one of the producers moved in, holding a hand between them, not touching, but near enough to show he was ready to halt this if it tipped over. "Ladies, I'm all for keeping it real. But if this turns into anything that jeopardizes the entire production, we need to chat off camera." Chimera? Neither of them moved. The tension was a live thing now, hovering over the room like a storm cloud that refused to break. Sierra looked over her shoulder to the small group of cast members seated to the side. "It's funny how silent everyone is. No one is going to say anything about what they've witnessed." Eyes glanced away. No one talked, and Yandy laughed sharply, almost bitterly. "That's the issue. You keep looking for someone to co-sign your narrative, but no one here is prepared to believe you since they know it's all a lie." Perhaps Sierra responded. "They just don't want to get caught in the middle of it. But believe me, they know." The weight of her comments lingered, pressing down on the room until it felt impossible to breathe out of nowhere. One of the quieter crew members unintentionally dropped a mic, and the clatter startled everyone just enough to break the silence. But it didn't last long. The hush snapped immediately back into place. Mendici spoke again. His voice dropped this time like he was attempting to speak to both women without letting it escalate into another public battle. "You're both walking a line right now, and once you cross it, there's no turning back. You think this is only about the two of you? You're mistaken. It impacts everyone here." Yandy didn't take her gaze away from Sierra. She's the one who began this, the one who decided to turn a situation into a personal attack. Sierra raised an eyebrow, which amused me because I thought this was a program about being authentic. Keeping things real isn't the same as dragging someone's name through the mud. Yandy shot back, her voice sharper now. "You have something to say. You say it to me, not to the entire set, not behind my back, and not dressed up like you. You are simply doing your job." Sierra's fingers drummed against the back of her phone again, in a slow, purposeful rhythm. "Perhaps I'm not dressing it up." Yandy's stance changed, her chin lifted slightly. "And maybe you're just upset because your own mess isn't enough to keep you in the spotlight." That jab landed. Sierra's jaw tightened for a few seconds before she regained her cool demeanor. "Believe what you want," Sierra finally murmured, her voice dipping low once more. "But don't be surprised when people start fitting the pieces together." The words hung there, heavier than before, because it was no longer just about the two of them. Someone in the back coughed, breaking the hush just enough for the tension to shift again. The producer had not moved his hand and was still hovering. And the space between them was like a line etched in invisible ink, and no one dared to leave the room. Everyone knew it wasn't over. Sierra's phone remained in her hand, resting there like a loaded secret. She didn't move, unlock it, or even look at the screen, since she didn't need to. People kept looking at it, as if they couldn't help but wonder if she'd finally flip it around and show everyone what was on it. Yan didn't flinch. Her arms were crossed, her weight shifted to one side, but nothing about her posture suggested she was going to back down. Sierra filled the quiet with a calm, grounded tone, as if she had determined to face whatever came next. "One sentence. Do you really want me to say it out loud?" she inquired.